Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Tricia. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes, today we have Stefonknee Wiolscht, and she is the author of Holding On by a Thread. It's a memoir, and I won't talk too much about it because it's all you.
Oh, okay. I'm in Canada. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I'm 61 years old. And a year and a half ago, I decided to write my memoir because my sister had passed away at age 61. And I thought, okay, time is running out. It's time to share my life experience as a trans woman. And so I set pen to paper and started just barfing everything out. And here we are a year and a half later, and Holding On by a Thread is real, it's tangible, and it's my story of my life as a child originally, and then going on to my transition from Paul to Stephanie. And yeah, so I can start wherever you want me to start. It's a memoir, and chapter one is about me being in the hospital on in the crisis ward because of depression, and I had lost everything. It was in 2009, July 23rd, and the world that I knew as Paul for 46 years was wiped out because I had been asked on May 20th to stop being transgender or leave my home. And I left not knowing that that would be the end of life as I knew it. And we ended up getting separated and divorced. But for me, I went from a middle-class white male to a homeless trans woman living in a city away from my kids, isolated from my children. And then very quickly, I went from not only being in a homeless shelter, I was arrested and incarcerated, and suffered from anxiety and depression. And so all these things just piled on to each other. And that's the premise of my story. And in the first chapter, I meet with the doctors and they ask me what brings me to the hospital. So I introduce myself that way through the eyes of the doctor. And then in the second chapter, I talk about my youth and prior to getting married and up until getting married. And then from that, I go on to talk about each of my children as they're born, and then the life that we had for 23 years. So I was 23 years old when I got married, was married for 23 years, and then I was isolated and alone again for the next 12 years. And that's what the book slowly goes through, all the activism that we did as trans people to make the world a better place, to get human rights, to fight those things called the bathroom bill that a lot of places said it was just about getting men into women's spaces. And from my experience, it was totally the opposite. I was in a women's shelter. I was in jail, in a female side of the jail. And even in the hospital, I was on a women's floor for in the crisis unit, and there was no incidents. Everything worked out really nice. The women accepted me as an equal, and I was able to progress with my transition, and at the same time debunk some of these rumors that were going around because of the political climate at the time. And so I share that history with the reader, and share pictures. The book is full of colored pictures to help them relate to what I was going through and who I'm talking about. And to me, it was a timely addition to any reading material that people might need to better understand what it's like to be transgender in the 21st century.
Yeah, I commend you. I mean, that's awfully brave to write that story, I feel like.
Yeah, it was hard, especially going back into my childhood as well. I had childhood trauma as well in there, and it was hard to relive some of those things. Writing about it brought up memories that I had forgotten about or I had suppressed, and they came back to give me nightmares, and it affected my sleep for a long time. And it was worth doing, but it was very hard to do. And in fact, I watered down some of the stuff from my childhood just because I couldn't say the things that needed to be said. I thought it was too much. I got my point across, and I left it at that. So I was uh, took me on quite the journey, and I was taken back to places that I had long put aside and tried to do with, like, move forward from.
Right.
And during the time that I was isolated from my family, I had lost my father. My mother had passed prior to me being homeless, but my dad passed away when I was homeless, and I wasn't made aware that he was had passed on, and I wasn't invited to his funeral. But the weird thing that happened was he visited me after he died, and that's in the book, the story of him coming 3 times to eventually I found out it was to ask for forgiveness, and I forgave him, and then he stopped coming. But I called my brother after the first visit and asked him if my dad had died, and he said yeah, and they were you know kind of embarrassed that they didn't call me and let me know. But then when my sister died, it was even worse. They eliminated me from her obituary, and that's in the book as well, like that, to be erased from someone's family, that even when in death, that someone denies your right to exist. It was very hard. So there was a lot of different catalysts to write this book and to go into some of the hardships that a lot of trans people realize. And I went through much of it, and the only thing that I didn't ever get involved with as a trans woman was the sex trade work. I was lucky that because I was able to find a shelter bed fast enough, I didn't need to resort to having to go on the streets and work to find a way to survive. And I very quickly adapted to being in a homeless shelter and worked my way through the shelter system into transitional housing, all the while working on my depression and anxiety with doctors, getting stronger. And then eventually I had my own apartment, and now I live in independent living situation where I'm back on my feet again, and things are looking really good.
Well, and just listening to you talk, I mean, you seem very peaceful and serene. It gave me goosebumps when you told me your dad visited you. Um, so do you feel like writing this book has brought you some peace? Just the process of, or the act of writing the book has brought you some peace and healing?
It has been so amazing, because as I was going through all these things, I kept asking myself, what can I learn here? When I was in the shelter, when I was in the hospital, when I was in jail, I said, what is the lesson to be learned? And without writing the book, I never would have been able to write those lessons down and pass them on to other people. And it made everything I went through, it justified it. It made it worthwhile, because I did come out the other side stronger, and I knew myself better, and I was able to translate that into words for the reader to experience what it's like to be in, to be in all these different situations. But in reality, I remember the first week or so in the shelter system, I thought, I don't know what to do now. Nobody teaches you how to navigate the system. And when you go to jail, nobody teaches you how to navigate that system. Mental health, nobody talks about. And so this book is a little bit of a insight into what to expect, because as you go through it, knowing what to expect would have made it a lot easier, because I always jumped to the worst conclusions. Like I thought, okay, that's it, my life is over. Okay, that's it, my life is over. Over and over again, I kept thinking it can't get any worse than this, my life is over. But in reality, there is a system in place to help you get back on your feet, to find yourself again, to become stronger, and then reunite eventually with your family again, which I've done. And all that was part of a system that is working quietly in the background of society, that's misunderstood, but it works. The system does work. I know a lot of people that have been in and out of jail, that have been in and out of shelters and in and out of the hospital, and they've gotten much better. Like things did get better. And this is a book of hope that stuff does get better.
Well, I really commend you for that, and thank you so much for writing the book. It was I couldn't wait to talk to you. I don't know if you know a little bit of my backstory. So I became anorexic as a young adult when I was 20 years old. And like you, when I was at my bottom in the mental health treatment facility at, 72 pounds, I thought my life was over. I thought it had ruined my life completely. And I really couldn't see a path forward from there. So I know what it feels like to be in that dark, desolate place of just not being able to see the path forward. And I was so lucky to have, people that could help around me, and that did help me and show me and help me heal. And kudos for writing your book the way you did, because when I went to write my story, and I don't think I don't regret my choice of writing it the way I wrote it now, because I just wrote a fictionalized account of my story. So I wrote about a character very much like me who went through the same things, but it wasn't me. So I was able to separate myself. I mean, still in writing it, I had to kind of relive those moments when I was writing her story, but I was able to kind of separate myself a little and say, well, this is me, but it isn't me, right? So to the
Yeah.
world, it's, and I'm very honest about, 90% of the book is me and 10% is a little bit fictionalized.
Right.
So did you work with a coach on writing this, or did you write it yourself?
I wrote it myself. I was really lucky that I have a friend who is a literary major in university, and she's the one who told me. Well, first she told me, "Don't make it a memoir. Make it a a nonfiction.
Biography?
Not a biography. What is? Oh, it'll come back to me. Where you can use you're at liberty to change some facts a little bit. But as I barfed it out, as I created this book, it was more and more. It was just the truth. So a creative nonfiction. That's what she had asked me to make it, a creative nonfiction. And as we moved along, we realized there's no need to do that. We can just leave it as a memoir, because it's covering that time and space of me going through the shelter system, and then sharing with the reader my life prior to it, and then shortly a little bit after that as well. And it worked out really nice, and I really appreciate Allison helping me with that. And then I also had a couple of people help me with editing. The first editor I had, she had a little bit of trouble getting through it with me. We got stuck on chapter 1 for the longest time, and then I said to her, I said, okay, let's leave it. I'll get somebody else, and we'll see if we can get through the book faster. And then I got Jillian involved, and she went through the book. I think it was like 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and we were done.
Awesome.
It was done faster than I was expecting it to be finished. So
That's
she
so
did
cool.
a really good job helping me as well. So between Linda Leenders, Jillian Rodriguez, and Allison Hannaford, they all helped me immensely, putting my words in some kind of coherent. Because, like I said, I barfed it out. Then we had to sort it out.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite the undertaking.
Yeah, I talk
So
to people who write nonfiction books, and it's a whole different thing than writing a fiction book and deciding like what parts you went where. Like starting out, it sounds like you started out sort of at your bottom. Like the first chapter is almost your bottom, and then you cut back to maybe where you came from and grew from there again. So making all
that's
those
a
decisions is Yeah.
That's exactly how it went. Yeah. I needed to start, and I knew where I was going to end too. I knew what the last sentence of the book was going to be.
Wow.
So I knew where to start. I knew where it was going to end, and it had a happy ending. I wouldn't have written it if it didn't have a happy ending, because I want to give people hope. And it took me 12 years to find hope. So there's a lot of funny stories in there. There's a lot of very sad stories. People have said it's made them cry, made them laugh, and which is what I set out to do. I wanted them to see that even in the worst situation, there were still things to laugh about. Even when I was in solitary confinement for 9 days, and even there by myself with just my thoughts, there were things to laugh about, and I really enjoyed learning about those things about myself. And I even said to the judge, I said, if you want to put me back in solitary, I don't mind it. It's actually, I find a lot of solitude in there, and I'm connecting with myself. I'm learning about my inner workings, and it was quite the experience. Um, it was I wouldn't say fun. It was hard to do. It's tough being in jail, but at the same time, it afforded me the opportunity to get to know myself better.
That's an amazing story. And yeah, just talking to you, I can tell that if someone picked this up and read it, then they would find that hope at the end. And yeah, that's
Yeah, that's the main reason for writing it. The secondary purpose for this book is to give people an idea what it's like to be transgender in 2024, from 2020 to 2024. Because as a child, we never had the words. We didn't talk about transgender people. We didn't talk about LGBT people. And we have since developed the language, developed the rights, developed the community, and in doing so, we've created a lot of backlash where people are coming back at us because they think we're asking for too much. And I think this book gives them an idea of why we need those protections put in place, so that we don't end up in jail, that we don't end up in a homeless shelter, and that we don't end up in a crisis unit of the hospital. I hope and pray that for young children that are coming out as trans now, that we've created a safe world for them to be themselves, and that they have the resources available, that it'll save lives.
right. Well, it's interesting that you came along just at this time, because so another group I'm in is called Unleash Your Inner Author. And one of the authors in that group released an anthology, and what it is different stories from different trans or LBGQT people.
Yep.
So I haven't read it yet. I picked it up, but I haven't read it yet. So yeah, I think the purpose of their book was maybe more the same, either for someone who's going through it to hear other people's stories, and some people who may not understand or just want more information or insight into thoughts, feelings, what your experience was. Because I can imagine that's maybe one of the more challenging things one would face as a human.
Well, as a child, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know there were more people like me. And so that was a big point of contention, because I didn't fit in my classroom where I was going to school. I start the story of my childhood at 6, because when I was 6 years old on picture day, girls used to get new dresses for picture day, and I never got a new dress. And that was confusing to me. And so it's a way of showing the reader that in 1969, we didn't have any help for this poor child at 6 years old questioning, am I a boy or am I a girl? And then in 2007, or the internet came along, right? And 2007, I was in a chat room, and they were talking about a course that they were having here in Toronto at Sherburne Health. And I qualified for the course, and I went and took it, and I was introduced to trans men for the first time, people that were born female that transitioned to male. And in this group, we were made of resources were made available to us, and we slowly realized that we had to become advocates and go out into the community and let more people know this is what's available to you. And so as we graduated this course, it was called Gender Journeys. We actually became the teachers. and we were out there helping people, and we were saving lives. I remember going to a bar one night, and there was this underage trans girl. She was about 14 or 15 years old in a bar, and she was a sex trade worker. And it broke my heart to see her in there doing what she was doing. So I took her aside and I said, "Can we go for coffee?" And I took her away from there, and she gave me her parents' phone number. So I called her parents and I said to them, "You have a choice. You're either going to bury your son or hug your daughter. And you need to make a decision now before it's too late. She's in a very dangerous spot. Her life is not safe, what she's doing. She's trying to survive and she's doing her best, but it's not something that you would wish on any young child." And that was an eye opener for me, that there was a lot of good that could be done. And in the book, I share that my problem is I'm Catholic, and the priest from our church suggested that I was possessed by the evil one for being transgender. But then I saw myself, if I'm integrating myself into this world and helping people get reunited with their children, that's got to be God's work. I must be following my calling, right? And so I embraced everything that happened as it was predestined. And this is the path that I've got to go on. And I have no choice but to keep moving forward. People ask me what the meaning of life is, or people ask, what is the meaning of life? I say it's a bicycle. You pedal as hard as you can and don't touch the handlebars.
Don't touch the
Let's see where the bike goes, and you'll be living life to your fullest. And my bicycle went to some very strange places. My world was turned upside down, and in the end, it became a story, and the story became a book. And I think the book is going to make a big difference in people's lives.
That's amazing. When you were talking about the bicycle, I got this, me and my sister, I'm really sorry for the loss of your sister. My sister passed away last year too. So
I'm
I
sorry.
can definitely feel that. But we used to play this game because we lived on it was a small street, so not many cars. And it was dirt, so it wasn't asphalt. And somebody would sit on the handlebars and close our eyes, but the person behind you was pedaling. So it was like you were holding onto the handlebars and sitting on the handlebars, but the person behind you was actually driving. Yeah,
Okay.
it was this fun game, but that's the mental image I got when you said that. That's neat.
I'm glad you got a nice image of you and your sister. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Little miracles, eh?
Yeah, I like that analogy of, you're just pedaling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't stop pedaling. Whatever you do, keep pedaling. And I had to keep telling myself that in the shelter, in the jail, in the crisis ward, that just keep moving forward. Don't stop pedaling. Whatever happens, happens. Take it as it's meant to be. And there are some really crazy stories in this book of things that happen to people because I happen to cross paths with them. And we have like so many little miracles that have happened that I share the details with. And even the nurses and the doctors, when they originally heard some of the things I was saying, they thought I was delusional. I was making predictions. I was prophesizing. And as these things came true, they realized, okay, there's something here that we can't explain, but it's not delusion. There's no delusion here. Stephanie's really saying what's on her mind, and she says it because it needs to be vocalized. And in saying the words, the prophecy comes true. And quite often, and there's lots of examples of it in the book. And those things are amazing to me, because anyone who is very spiritual, very religious, could look at my life and say, "Oh, I'm a bad person, and that I need to find Jesus and redeem myself." But they'll learn by reading the book, not only did I not lose Jesus, I was working with Jesus. I was working with God and doing the things when I had nothing. I had nothing to offer the world, and I still was able to make a difference in people's lives. On 3 occasions, I was in church, and they have the story of the poor widow. She put her last penny in the collection basket. I 3 times dumped my coin purse with whatever bus tokens and coins I had, to the point where I had $0. I had nothing to show for my life. And you know what? Every time something good happened after I did that. Once I hit the bottom with nothing to lose, life gets so much nicer, and you reevaluate the path you're on and say, okay, maybe I need to go in this direction and do some good with my life. And over again, I did those kind of things.
Yeah, I feel so amazed and so in awe that you had that inner core, I'm gonna keep going. And it's gonna, something within you, your soul or whatever you call it, just said, keep going.
I think it's the God that's in us. I believe we're all created in God's image, and that we can tap, whether you do meditation or grounding, there are those times when we can connect with our inner selves and really feel that we are accomplishing what we need to do. If it's as simple as square breathing, bringing in a breath, holding the breath, letting out the breath, having no breath, and then repeat. And those things ground us to the point where our heart is doing what our heart needs to do, our soul is doing what our soul needs to do, our brain is coping the best it can, and we're still surviving, we're still moving forward. And to me, I have a beautiful meditation in the book of something that came to me. I was working with students at the University of Toronto, and this message came to me: lead them in a guided meditation. And so I told the students, we're going to dim the lights, and if you feel comfortable, close your eyes, put your hands in your lap, put your feet on the floor, and I'm going to walk you through this meditation. I had no idea where this meditation was going to go, and I went with it, and it became their favorite meditation. I ended up typing it out and giving it to people, and people loved it. And I thought, this is such a weird journey that I just took them on. And you literally start inside your body, you go out into outer space, you go down to the bottom of the ocean, and you crawl back inside your body. But the whole time you're aware of this energy, and that all is good, and all is good, and all manner of things, all is good. And those type of meditations, for especially around exam time, the students just loved having something to ground themselves and say, take a deep breath, it'll be okay.
Right.
Everything that
Like,
needs to happen will happen.
yeah, think about like how the stakes and I guess it's the stakes. Think about like how bad this could be, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of pressure on them, right? Their
Oh yeah.
parents are paying for their school, or they have a student loan to pay back. And it all depends on how well they do in their course and if they get a job afterwards. And so they have all this pressure coming down on them, and they're forgetting, I'm alive. My body's doing what it needs to do. Everything is doing everything that it has to do, and I'll be okay. And just to remind them that it's okay. And I've used this meditation in the hospital, in the schools, in church groups, all over the place. And I just love sharing the meditation. That's why I put it in the book. The other thing that's in the book as well is I write poetry and short stories. And I include at the end of most of the chapters a little poem or something that came to me in the midst of my depression, in the midst of my homelessness. These beautiful stories came about, and I share them in the book, that this came to me. And I think they're pretty good. People really enjoyed having those inserted into the book as well. And I felt that rather than making a book of poetry, I would just make this book a little bit longer and include it in there.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and they're
amazing.
funny.
I mean, this book feels like it has so many gems in it. I'm gonna like keep it by my bedside and keep turning the pages.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. The other thing I was going to ask you is, you were talking about a friend of yours that just published a transgender book. Do you mind sharing the name of the book?
Um, I think it's called
Mm.
Transformation or something like. I'll send you the link to it.
Okay.
And I afterwards then I can put it at the bottom of I don't want want to take away from selling your book.
Oh,
But,
okay. Yeah, no.
but yeah, so yeah, I can send you the link to it. You can buy them on Amazon. It's really easy to get. So it's just short
Perfect.
stories by people that are trans or have gone through that. Or I think some family members and some people just sharing their experience. So yeah.
Great. I will buy that book.
Okay,
I'm
good.
so looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, Stefonknee, tell us where we can find your book and you if we want to know more.
Okay. So you can find me on the internet under www.Stefonknee. It's Stefonknee with an F and K, STEF on ONKNEE, knee, Stefonknee.com. Or you can go to transstef, TRANSSTEF.com, and that's my book is available there. My book is available in the States at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, in the UK at Waterstones. Ingram Spark has my book, and in Canada you can get it from Amazon or from Indigo.
Fine. Well,
So
we
it's
will have all the links so people can get them at the bottom of the podcast. But thank you for being here and sharing your story with us. I feel so blessed to have heard it.
Trisha, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving me the time to share my story.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Trisha Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.